Jai Gurudev. Gurudev often teaches about transforming negative emotions into positive actions. For instance, he speaks of redirecting greed towards craving satsang. How do modern psychological studies support this idea that changing one's emotional focus can lead to transformation? That's a great question. Modern psychology and neuroscience actually back up Gurudev's teachings on emotional redirection. A study published in the Journal of Positive Psychology explored the power of focusing on gratitude and positive emotions. It found that individuals who regularly practice gratitude and focus on uplifting emotions experience reduced levels of anxiety and depression. This aligns directly with Gurudev's teaching of craving satsang. When people focus on spiritual growth, connection, and wisdom, they naturally reduce negative emotional states like greed or attachment. Furthermore, research into neuroplasticity suggests that our brain can rewire itself based on our thought patterns. So, when we consciously redirect an emotion like greed toward a positive goal, say a deep longing for wisdom or divine connection, it not only shifts our emotional experience but also creates new neural pathways that foster greater well being. That is fascinating. Another wise that Gurudev talks about is anger. He suggests that instead of getting angry over trivial matters, we should get angry about the infinite, which is quite an unusual perspective. How can anger, typically seen as a negative emotion, be channeled for personal growth? Anger is often misunderstood as purely destructive, but it can also be a powerful force for transformation when we channel it consciously. Gurdev's perspective encourages us to elevate anger. If we consider anger as an energy source like electricity, it can either harm or help depending on how it is used. Psychologically, anger is a response to a perceived threat, but the intensity of this feeling can be redirected for a higher purpose. Research in emotional regulation shows that when we reframe the cause of our anger and apply it to something larger, like feeling frustrated by the state of the world or by an injustice, we can use that energy to fuel positive change. Gurudev's guidance to be angry about the infinite encourages us to become angry about issues like global inequality, injustice, or environmental destruction, motivating us to take action. In yogic psychology, there is also the concept of tapas, or intense inner discipline. By using our emotional energy, whether anger or desire, to create positive action, we transform it into something sacred. Anger becomes fuel for change rather than something that consumes us. That makes sense. Gurudev's idea of transforming pride by taking pride in owning the divine is another powerful teaching. Can you provide more insight into how this works, especially in light of what we know about self esteem and pride in psychology? Absolutely, Gurudev's approach to pride is deeply liberating. Typically, pride can be a source for ego and separation. It leads us to compare ourselves with others and can result in arrogance. However, when we shift our sense of pride from personal achievements to an awareness of the divine within, we move from a limited sense of self to an expansive universal understanding. Psychologically, pride linked to external accomplishments can be fleeting as it depends on comparisons with others, but pride rooted in spiritual awareness is enduring. Studies on self compassion show that when people connect with their higher selves or a sense of something bigger than themselves, they develop greater resilience and well being. They no longer need external validation because their sense of self worth comes from within. This idea is similar to the concept of self actualization in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where the highest form of human flourishing comes from recognizing one's potential and connection to the greater whole, which in spiritual terms is the divine. Such a shift in perspective can be truly transformative. How do Gurudev's teachings on attachment and aversion connect with research in modern psychology, particularly when it comes to well being and emotional regulation? Attachment and aversion are deeply connected to human suffering. In fact, one of the foundational principles in Buddhist psychology, which aligns with many of the Gurudev's teachings, is that attachment leads to suffering. We become attached to outcomes, people, and possessions, and when those things change or are lost, we experience grief and sorrow. Research into attachment theory in psychology suggests that secure attachment, whether to caregivers, community, or a higher power, leads to greater emotional stability and resilience. When we shift our attachment from transient things to something eternal, like the teachings of the Guru or the presence of the divine, we cultivate a sense of peace that is not easily disturbed by external circumstances. On the other hand, aversion, the desire to avoid discomfort or unpleasant experiences, often increases our mental suffering. Gurudev's teaching to be averse to aversions encourages us to let go of this resistance. Studies in acceptance and commitment therapy (ACT) show that accepting uncomfortable emotions rather than fighting them leads to greater psychological flexibility and well being. This approach mirrors Gurudev's idea of accepting what is rather than constantly pushing away what we don't want. Finally, Gurudev talks about the joy being love for what is and sorrow as love for what is not. How does this view resonate with current research on emotional well-being? The teaching encapsulates a profound understanding of human emotions. Research on mindfulness and present moment awareness aligns with Gurudev's idea that joy arises when we fully accept and love what is. Studies in positive psychology highlight that people who cultivate gratitude and presence in their daily lives tend to experience greater life satisfaction and lower levels of stress. This is because they are no longer yearning for something outside themselves, but instead appreciating the richness of the present moment. Sorrow, as Gurudev suggests, comes from attachment to what is not present, the longing for something that has passed or that we believe should be different. Psychologically, this aligns with rumination, a process where individuals repeatedly focus on past regrets or future anxieties. Research shows that rumination is linked to depression and anxiety. But by training the mind to focus on the present, we can reduce the suffering and find peace in what already is. So, in essence, when we stop yearning for what we don't have and instead embrace what we do, we align with both spiritual wisdom and contemporary psychological insights on well being. Thank you for sharing these incredible insights. It is clear that Gurudev's teachings, when understood deeply, resonate not only with ancient wisdom but also with modern psychological and scientific principles. It's been my pleasure to share these teachings. Indeed, when we apply them with sincerity and dedication, they help us align with our highest potential, leading to both inner peace and outer harmony. Jai Gurudev.